Accessibility, dus building film. Ja, er is geswitcht om de partner van Klo.
Already uploading this morning sessions?
Nee, de twee dat gingen doen is voor maar één partij hier. Wow, accessibility.
89 back.
We gaan vandaag weer over. Ik ga even mezelf voorstellen, zo de achtergrond een beetje begrijpen. Yeah, okay. I'm supposed to do it in English.
If nobody minds.
No. Everybody understands English.
Yeah.
So first I'm gonna talk about me like for 5 seconds, and then what accessibility is about in this presentation, because obviously accessibility is a very large issue. Benefits. There's always, if you ask people for an extra effort, it's always nice to tell them what their profit or their interest is. Then a real life guide to make your weblog accessible in 30 days. And 30 days shouldn't be taken like 30 times 24 hours. Some tips will take you like a couple of minutes to implement, so that's 1 day's work. Other will take like 48 hours, but we'll get to that. And you get to ask questions. Okay, I started out professionally in '96 as a web designer. That meant like, I think it was always a pretty pretentious title, like, dude, I'm designing the web. It would have been nice, never did it. But I was a graphical kind of guy. I have Photoshop designs and I converted them in HTML tables, whatever. In '98 I became art director for another company. Still, it was very visually, I mean, art direction in the web area normally is about design, visual design. 2000, I even got to manage some graphical weirdos in 2001, and that's probably the most important step in the process for me personally. I started my weblog in this, and now I'm creative consultant, which is a bit of all and a bit of nothing. But conclusion was, when I thought about it, like, okay, I'm all about visual experiences, and up till 2001 or 2002, I considered myself doing exactly that, giving people nice visual experiences. So, I'm all about visual experience, wrong, dead wrong, because I'm stupid. This is actually a HTML slideshow. Yeah, now it seems to be okay. I'm not only about visual experience, but about user experiences, because that's what your users, that's all you get to know about them. They're your users. You don't know shit about what they're able to do behind their screens. And good design should do exactly that. Design in a broader sense should not be just good looking. Good design even smells good. What is accessibility in general about? This is the definition I took from Wikipedia yesterday, and I thought there were a couple of things that are important in this definition. That's things should be usable by as many people as possible without modification. And that's about it. Accessibility for me is about taking away the hindrances that people who are not your average Joe might encounter. And it's even for the average Joe, because a lot of designers I know, and believe me, I know a lot of really graphically talented people. We had arguments like, okay, 10 pixels may be nice for a font size, but in 9 pixels it's so much better looking. And I said, well, we're not even going to talk about 9 pixels, not about 10, about the visual equivalent of 12 or 14 pixels. And by the way, you have to make it small or extra small in your style sheet, not 12 pixels. In the context of this presentation, of course, we're going to talk about visually impaired more surfing. When you get to do the effort of making your website accessible, there's a lot of people benefiting, and obviously most people will immediately think of blind people, but there's way more to it. There's of course the blind, but there's also the colorblind. If you check your site on colorblind schemes, you will see that, for example, a typical issue when you haven't done this exercise is that your links and your visited links do look exactly the same for somebody who's colorblind. The farsighted, there's a lot of people older than 40 who are to some degree farsighted. Like your dad, for example. If he's wearing glasses with factor say 2 is fairly reasonable and very common. In 2, he already needs like 2 pixels more of a font size. There's also the contrast diminishes in the eye. I mean, with every one of you sitting in this room, within 10 years, your contrast vision will have decreased by 20%. It's facts. I mean, so it's a lot of people are talking about it. So that makes like 50% of the surfing population. That's not like visually perfect. Who else benefits? Traffic wars. Because of this huge population. If your site is not accessible to people, people will not consult it, which seems pretty obvious. So traffic wars should definitely take care of accessibility to increase their audience. And traffic wars, and that means of course you, because you're a blogger, right? Yeah, you. That's for you, Mark. So, this will be very practical. This 30 days concept is not mine. It's from Mark and he has a lot of series like dive into Python, for example. Also dive into accessibility. He's one of the most clever, the more clever minds of the, say, the internet scene for the moment. He's like in great discussions with Dave on the internet. They can't stand each other. And did I say 30? What the hell make it 25? Because the first 5 days, what Mark does is just tell you like, okay, we have this user, and this user works on this platform and has these disabilities. So later on, when he'll explain what you do to make your weblog accessible, he will tell you exactly people with that disability will profit from it. So I already told you some tips. Take like typically in weblogging software, you can make one adjustment to a template and your entire blog has changed. And some of those, typically those tips, will be very easily implemented. Others, when content is involved, yeah, then depends on what the quality of your input was before. So that might take 48 hours and even longer sometimes. Say for example the most obvious one, you haven't filled out alt tags and images and you've been publishing for 3 years and every post has an image in it and you're posting like 2-3 times a day. I think you've been doing that. But the benefit once you have done this, it's a once in a lifetime effect. I mean, there's some extra effort that you have to do while writing a post, but once you get the habit, that won't take you very long. So, we're immediately going to week 2. Why? Because week 1 is the introduction of the people with disabilities. But I'd recommend you, should you visit his site, read those, because then you get an idea of why can't I open link in a blank window, for example. First, choosing a doc type, that's like, okay, the good news, what I forgot to tell you before, is when you use default templates from most weblog software, a lot of the tips are more or less dealt with. And in movable type, the default templates that are used there are perfectly compatible. I mean, it's meer dan trots personally to care that the templates, the moment she read the accessibility, the dive into accessibility website, she decided to have all those tips implemented on the templates. So right away out of the box, when you use movable type, you have to a very large extent an accessible website. But default templates are, for example, it has a English language tag. Of course, if you're publishing in Dutch, you should change exactly that. So, doc type, why is it important? Because some of the tips later on will be affected by what doc type you choose. Say, for example, font sizes. When you use an XHTML doc type, then font sizes are pretty much the same in every browser. Should we use HTML for one namespace, then say use small for a font, will be like 3 to 4 pixels larger in Firefox than it does in an Internet Explorer. Identifying your language, that seems to be a bit theoretical, but it's very important here. Because when really blind, how do they surf? They have the text read out to them. The software interprets the language to the language specified. So if it's reading Dutch and the reader believes that it's English, the pronunciation will like totally suck and be 100% incomprehensible. Also, in the other direction, say you're typing English or you're typing whatever language and you're using expressions that are commonly known, you should also mark that area specifically as being in another language, because also the problem is the software tries to pronounce it the way that language would do. An obvious one, constructing meaningful page titles. Now, most link horse, I needn't say why they should do that, because that's also very Google friendly.
Google.
And of course, this also, everything that has to do with text changes is meaning in the first place that because texts are read out loud, the people can immediately hear, like, we can scan visually, we can say, like, at the end of the page, okay, I don't care, if they want to see the end of the page, they have to have read out to them the entire page. Which is why also we need to provide additional navigation aids. This is a very important tip. That's the additional navigation aids are, for example, the jump over navigation button. Typically, if you use a lot of HTML, first comes the navigation and then comes the actual content. Now, when the reader always has to read the entire navigation, say navigation bar, there's 30 items in there, the blind get bored, you know. If they have to go through that every time and again they visit another page. but it goes further than that. There's less obvious things like you can have previous and next pages built in that your browser recognizes, like Firefox does that, Opera does that. And that, for example, is also implemented in the movable type templates, which I find a very nice feature because that's very useful to them. And another one is even better than the skip navigation, for example, is presenting your main content first and putting a link somewhere. Okay, skip to navigation should be bidirectional. So, okay, skipping over navigation links. Using color safely. Because we're not only talking about alignment, but also about people with issues like slightly less contrast, you should be very careful with that. For example, what things designers like to do is we take one blue for the normal link, for the unvisited link. And when we fade the blue a bit, people will understand that it's a visible link. People will understand if they see it properly. But the degree to which we can make the distinction of a slightly faded color is strongly dependent of our contrast theory. So that you should check. One way to check this also pretty safely is to check it for the color blind. I'll show you a tool at the end of the presentation where you can really have yours, you go to a tool, have yours, upload your site, just the screen, and he will transform it into the 3 different types of color blinds. And if the contrasts are fitting these, you can also fairly assume that the contrast will be big enough for people with slight contrast. Using real links, that means like no link starting with JavaScript, semicolon, and whatever. That goes for everything. That's also a good tip. You always use real links. Even if you should use pop-ups, which later on you'll see you have to avoid as much as possible. Even if you use those, there's methods to have them as HTML links. That's mainly because a lot of these text-only browsers will have difficulties with JavaScript. Adding titles to links, and that's okay, provide your users with extra information. Where will this link bring you? You can put it in the title tag. Defining keyboard shortcuts. Until I read about accessibility, I didn't even know that existed. But you can have things like, okay, when you press Ctrl-0, you go to the home page. And there's a lot of conventions, but not a lot, 5 conventions, like contact form, go to the search immediately. And that's like, then once again, very, very easy to implement, and yet nobody does it. And it's a great time save. Even I use them sometimes when I'm on a website I know that has them. You can immediately jump because I don't like to use my mouse, and then shortcuts are so very nice. So that everybody benefits.
Is it indicated in that site that this has those functionalities?
No. Yes and no. Sorry. When you have Firefox, for example, and you have the web developer toolbar installed, you can have it displayed. So when it has those shortcuts, it will indicate like, okay, there's a shortcut here. But there's no way that you can see it out of the box. Yeah. But that's the latest tip. So in the next week, or in the 6th week, you will see that the latest thing you will have to do once you implemented all these is write out an accessibility statement and put it on your website. On every page, like you put a contact page. So that people with disabilities can see, okay, what features do I have here, what can I use, what can I not use, because of the lack of automation for recognition of those features. So not opening new windows, why is that? And that's a very large usability, like it's almost a religious war in usability terms. because now so many people are used that links opening new windows that they're confused when they actually have to push back, which is the other way around, but it's a fact. From accessibility's point of view, you should never open new windows. Why is that? Because the people who are reading their screens with magnifiers, they have like one character is like this big on the screen. If they have to go and close the so it's really a pain for them. It's really very nasty. Defining acronyms, that's a content one, so that is a thing that could take you some time. That means like whenever you use an acronym or an abbreviation, but the acronym tag works. Whenever you use an abbreviation, you should explain what it stands for. That means like you write the word DVD, you can go and explain digital versatile basically. Now once again, it's not because Maarten is in the room, but I'm a movable type user. And movable type has a plugin for that, so once you use an abbreviation, he will always check when you post for these abbreviations and then go and replace for every known abbreviation that he has. Otherwise it's really, really hard. Giving your calendar a real caption, that's for those who use it when you use tables in general in HTML. That's like complex for a screen reader to read. Why? Because imagine that you're having this 50-row, 7-column table with data on it, and the screen reader would just read like, okay, 10, 5, 7, okay, what does this 7 stand for at the 35th line, 5th column? So there you have to use like extra information that will tell, okay, I'm in this row and I'm in this column, and he will get the relation, the screen reader will get the relation when the user asks for it. But that's an extra effort. And that's in calendars, that's in every table you got. And also you should explain a summary for your tables, because it's so complex for the screen reader to read it out loud. People will obviously often want to skip them. And we can of course look at the table and see, okay, it's relevant or not. If you don't put a summary in for them, it's quite impossible to see. Ignoring spacer images, well, as a common practice, I'd say, why use them in the first place? I mean, we're like 2006. Spacer images, I haven't come across a case in real life where you still need them. If you do, tell me so, and I'll point you out to a site where there's other ways to solve your problem. Now, if you're dealing with an older website where you just can't go and change the layout and the code of the pages, then make sure that all your spacer images are named exactly that, spacer.gif, because then the screen reader will know, okay, this is a spacer image, and put an empty alt tag in it, then it validates as well. Using real lists or faking them properly, that's like if you have a list that looks like a list, okay, use the UL and line tags. And faking, once again, 2006, you shouldn't fake anything anymore, because you can do with lists whatever you want. You can make drop-down menus, you can have horizontal ones, you can have whatever with lists. Providing text equivalents for images, the most obvious being, of course, alt tab your images. You should have been doing that since whenever. So keep on doing that. If you want to go for example, the line server compatibility for the logo, then alt is all that's required, because there's also a long disk which will, some point in time, will become verplicht
Obligatory. Obligatory.
Obligatory. For the moment, it's not necessary. So alt is not too much of an effort to use. And using real horizontal rules if you want to define two pieces of text in, and you can even with style sheets, like hide them, whatever you want to do with using. Using relative font sizes, that's especially important because okay, I'm closing. Using relative font sizes, I mean everybody who's made websites knows that there's only one browser who can't magnify absolute font sizes, and it's thanks to people from Barcamp that you have to do that. But use them. Using real headers, so use H1, H2, etc. instead of div class, big title, div class, medium title, etc. Also, very important for Google, once again, it's significance. You should always use significance when possible. Labeling form elements, that's also nice. So when we see a label next to an input field, we can make a connection. Visually impaired people, blind people can't. So you should add a label to it, or tell to the form element the label is over there. Making everything searchable, that's like a very good, that's just plain good design. I mean, you should have done it all. And then creating the accessibility statement where you explain what efforts have you done. And that's...
Is it in a formal way that we should define it? Is there a formal way? Is there some kind of definition?
For those form labels? Yeah.
No, for the statements.
There's not really a formal way. There's nice examples on, for example, the Dive into Accessibility website. You should just do things like, okay, there's also links here. Questions. I'm sorry, we don't have time for questions now, but I will put it on the wiki. And it's also the presentation. I mean, I've been surfing it now from my website, so the presentation is live on that address already. You'll also see if you just check my personal webload controls. It is valid. I mean, it's been screened by blind surfer, etc. It's been validated by section 508, etc. And there you can see, for example, accessibility statement. It's okay, I think.
Då måste vi leva lite.
Ja, ik wist het.